Hello, welcome. Happy Tuesday. Oh my goodness. So it is literally never a dull moment around here, like between moving offices and my internet being out yesterday afternoon because the maintenance guy tripped the breaker and I had to fix my internet and it took way longer than it should. Oh my gosh, seriously. Oh, running a business is not for the faint of heart. I'm not kidding you. You have to be on your toes all the time. It is not something that you can just magically hope it works for you. I don't know anybody that can do everything, least of all at once. So, today we're going to be talking about how to start a limited liability company. Now, I've done videos on this in the past, so those are on my YouTube channel, but I wanted to come back to it because there's more that I wanted to talk about and also a little more depth that I wanted to go into. So that's why, even though they're similar, they're not going to be the same, obviously. So the most important thing to remember is that a limited liability company is a company and not a corporation. It's very different than a corporation. We'll talk about those differences. If you're new here, my name is Taylor Darcy from Think Legal, where I help you create the business of your dreams. So welcome. I go live Monday through Friday, most of the time at 11, generally. That's when I try to go live. So please stop in, leave a comment where you're from. I'd love to get to know you, and please feel free to chat, ask questions. That's why I do these live, is because I want to reach more people and help more people this way. So I look forward to getting to know you. With that in mind, let's get started. Now, I'm streaming to several different places through a service called Restream. And I use it so that I can go live and not have to publish the video on multiple fronts. So you may be viewing me on Twitch. You may be viewing me on LinkedIn. You may be viewing me on Facebook. You also may be on YouTube. Any one of those ways is a great way to get a hold of me. I'm trying to help as many people as possible, and part of that comes from being able to meet them where they are. And so the honest effort is to make sure that I'm getting out to as many people as possible. So the number one thing that you need to be aware of when a limited liability company is a new entity, relatively speaking. People are more familiar with corporations. They're more common. People's perception of them is that they're better only because there's a familiarity with them. That doesn't mean they're actually better. And the reason why I say that is because the liability shield that goes with the corporation versus a limited liability company, or LLC is the short term for it, is the exact same. There is no difference. They don't, the courts, the system do not afford the limited liability company less or more protection. Now, that being said, a corporation requires corporate formalities that a limited liability company does not. So it's very important that as you're considering which entity, not every entity is right for you. And also, just because the internet says it's true doesn't mean it is. I cannot recommend enough that you get legal counsel in your local area to discuss what is right for you, because every case is fact specific. Can I say that that this is generally the rule? Yes. But if you are the one that might apply for this being different, there are certain rules that go with corporations that don't go with LLCs, and certain rules that go with LLCs that don't go with corporations. And so the cost is high if you get it wrong. You don't want to get this wrong and the consequence can be that what's called the corporate veil or the liability shield can be pierced a lot easier if you don't get this right. So you've got to get it right, which is why I say, and I've said, Google is not your friend in this, because yeah, sure, your friend has done, oh, I've started an LLC and no problem, or I'll do Google and it works, and I can just go to LegalZoom, which don't even get me started on them. The problem is that the issue with those is that they don't know what you don't know, what you don't know. And so when you're putting in the question into Google without asking, you don't know the fifth or sixth question you need to be asking. And so that's where an attorney comes into it, where that you need that extra help, okay? Because they know the questions that you don't know to ask, okay? So, number one, if you are planning on doing an LLC, you can reserve. Now, this is California. I have to caveat this. This is California. Your state may be different if you're viewing this out from outside of California. But in California, you can reserve your name if you don't plan on registering it immediately. If you're starting a business and you're thinking strongly about starting a business and you're thinking about an LLC and it's got a catchy name to it, you're going to want to register that, or rather, you're going to want to reserve that name as soon as possible. You don't have to register the name. There's nothing that says that you have to. But what it does is it allows the Secretary of State to put a reserve on that. So you don't have to worry about it being taken if you aren't able to start your business right away. So if you're thinking of this beautiful, amazing name, try getting it reserved first. Now, before you reserve it, you're going to want to go to the Secretary of State website. Again, California is free. This is easy. Go to the Secretary of State website. Underneath the business entity section, you can do a quick search and find out if that business entity name has been taken. Now, and here's the weird part. There can actually be a corporation and an LLC of the same name because of the way that the search works. So you want to make sure that you're searching underneath both, just in case, to make sure that it's not taken. Now, I have to preface this by saying just because you have a registered name does not mean you have a trademark for it. That's a different topic for a different day, but they are not the same. So you can register your business and get a cease and desist letter for if the trademark has been taken and someone's trademarked the name, because the way the federal law preempts state law. Does that happen regularly? No. Can it happen? Yes. That's the reality. So you want to do a search. You want to do this in conjunction with each other. You want to register your business name. You want to do a trademark around the same time. Also, trademarks take a long time. A LLC takes relatively short period of time to get started. The trademark, on the other hand, can take anywhere between 6 months and a year, depending on the trademark attorney and how backed up they are. It takes a minimum of 3 months for your trademark, the reviewing attorney, to get assigned from the USPTO. That's minimum. That's not even for them to approve it. It can take, my last trademark took a year, not just because of how long it took the trademark attorney to do it. Not me, the USPTO attorney, the reviewing attorney. So you have to keep that in mind, that if you're going to do this, it's better to set aside and get it all done at the same time so you can be off to the races and you're not running the risk of there being a trademark infringement for the name, okay? So that's number 2. Simple to do a search on the Secretary of State. Don't put that off. Don't make it sense to do it. Number 3. Next thing is you're going to want to file your articles of organization. This is LLC specific, with the Secretary of State. Now, if you've already previously reserved a name, it'll ask you if you want to use that name in those articles of organization. But if you haven't reserved the name, and by the way, nothing says that you have to reserve a name. The only time you want to reserve that name, again, is if you're not planning on doing it right away and you don't want to risk losing that name for whatever reason. That's important. So in California, it is only $75 to do a articles of organization. Very cheap. There's really no downside to that. You get a certified copy. It takes anywhere between 3 and 4 business days, depending on how backed up the Secretary of State is and how many people are applying. And so it could take longer, but I've seen it come back as quickly as 3 days. That's the easy part. Before you can get started in business, you're going to want to wait for those articles to come back from the Secretary of State. Again, that can take anywhere between 3 days up to a week, 7 days, depending on their backlog. Now, if you choose to mail it in under the perception that it's better, which it's really not, there's no real difference, it can take up to a month. So if someone's telling you it's going to take a while because they're doing it manually, I don't do it manually. I do it manually, but I send it electronically. So just keep that in mind, that it takes longer if you send it in by paper. Mail time plus the time that it takes them to process it, their backlog of other things. It's not as fast if you do that. Okay. So then you're going to be waiting for a little bit. Not very long. Again, short, fairly short, depending on your business choice, name, and all that stuff. Once those articles come back from the Secretary of State, you're going to want to get what's called the EIN, or Employer Identification Number, from the IRS. This is your taxpayer ID number. This is what you need to be able to file taxes. It's what you're going to need if you're going to have employees. It's what you're going to have if you are going to pretty much do anything, apply for business credit. Your EIN is essential for you to do that. But you've got to wait till after you've got your articles back. Again, it's not a long time process. You can get your EIN the same day. I caution you though, and this is one of those Taylor's tips, if you will. Maybe I should do that from now on. Taylor's tips. Yeah, I think I will. Taylor's tips. So if you're getting an EIN number from the IRS, make sure that you are able to complete it all in one session, or it will block you from getting another one for 24 hours. Or if you try it, start it, and then don't finish it, you have to wait 24 hours for the system will lock you out. You can't get another one, or you can't finish it for 24 hours and you have to start all over again. So tip, make sure you're ready to do it all in one sitting. So make sure you have when your business was formed, the shareholder information. Now, for tax purposes, a LLC, and this is where the major difference between an LLC and a corporation are. An LLC is what's called a disregarded entity for a single member LLC, and it automatically defaults to a partnership for a multi-member LLC. Now, there are some exceptions to that, and you can actually get what's called an S-Corp tax designation for an LLC. We're not going to talk about that today, but just know that that's possible. And what that does is, what that means is on your taxes, you're just going to report it as regular income after your deductions. It's very easy. You should have a CPA take a look at it before. This is just overall general advice. Don't rely on this to make your decision. Talk to a tax attorney, talk to a CPA, or talk to a tax attorney or a CPA, preferably a CPA. Tax attorneys tend to work with controversy as opposed to filing. Depends on the attorney. So you're going to want to get that EIN. The EIN, it again takes 10, 15, 20 minutes tops. You can get it the same day. Really doesn't take a long time. So don't put it off and don't wait for later. Next thing, and this is this is one area that you're going to want to pay attention. Within 90 days of your filing of articles of organization, you are going to want to file what's called your statement of information. Now, this is just another wonderful paper that the Secretary of State charges you more money for. It's $20 or $25 for certified, I believe. It's anyway, not expensive, but it's basically, it asks about who's the primary shareholder, who's the executive officers, or not shareholder, member, executive officers, secretary, all of that stuff, where you're going to be doing business. And here's where your what's called a registered agent is input. And this is who is going to accept legal documents on behalf of the corporation. Now, because you're a corporation or an LLC, it exists on paper, but it doesn't exist in real life. Like it's not a physical, tangible person, right? So there has to be a physical, tangible person for them to serve the documents to if you get sued in a lawsuit. Someone that they can put the papers, hand them to, and serve. It's got to be super easy. The person, the registered agent has to be available during work hours to be served at that address, whatever address you put on that. And there are penalties if you choose not to be, if you choose not to be available at that time, because it makes serving that business entity a lot more difficult. Okay. So that's number 6. File your statement of information. I just do it right after the articles come back. I shouldn't say right after. I wait for a couple of days because sometimes the articles come back and it's not quite in their system yet that you exist. So I always do the statement of information like 2-3 days after, but I don't put it off for that 90 days because people forget, things happen. I don't recommend it. So keep that in mind that you want to do it relatively soon. I've maybe a week with after you've filed the articles, or gotten them back, I should say, of organization. Now, the next part of this is going to be something that is simple, but a lot of people don't think about. And this is where the internet is not your friend. You need, as part of your LLC, what's called an operating agreement. Now, a lot of people, especially small businesses or first-time business owners, think they don't need that. And that could not be farther from the truth. And this goes to what I was talking about earlier about piercing the corporate veil, or in this case, piercing the liability shield. Your operating agreement is a requirement by the state, and you need to have someone draft that for you. Now, you theoretically could draft it yourself in the sense that you can always pro se things, like you can always represent yourself, you can always draft it. But you're going to have to sift through lots of codes and sections and LLC language to find out what you need, what's optional, what you don't need, what would be nice, so on and so forth. And so it's not a good use of your time. I'll be honest, it's not. It's not a good use of your time because there's so many more important things that you could be doing. And this is where a lot of sole proprietors or single member LLCs get themselves in trouble. Without that operating agreement, you're operating as though you're still a sole proprietor. And that's where your liability shield can get pierced. If the opposing party can prove that you didn't keep up with your corporate formalities, then it's a lot easier for them to pierce the corporate veil. That doesn't say they absolutely will, but why risk it? Why chance it? An accountant, although they could theoretically fill out the paperwork up until all of this, they can't draft the operating agreement. Google can't give you an operating agreement because that's practicing law. LegalZoom cannot give you an operating agreement. They can give you like ideas for an operating agreement, but they can't draft it for you. They don't know what language is appropriate for you. It's a complete risk that you're taking that is unnecessary, I might add, that you, by not drafting an operating agreement or by not having it. The rest of that stuff's easy. Like, I mean, that's a piece of cake, relatively speaking. But where most small businesses get in trouble is that they just kind of disregard it. And when they do everything else, then they forget to do the operating agreement and it ends up biting them in the butt later. And this is so important. Please, another Taylor's tip coming. Taylor's tip. If you are in a multi-member LLC, you absolutely, positively have to have an operating agreement. Like, I mean, that's true of single member, but it's even more true of multi-member. And what else do you need? Another Taylor's tip coming. Buy-sell agreement. So many disputes could be solved if people would pay attention to the details at the beginning. A lawsuit that could cost you thousands of dollars or more could be easily avoided if you have these documents in place. it is worth the money to get it done right and started in the beginning than it is to risk it in the future because, and this is the truth, more businesses fail than don't. If you want to think about it, it's like a business prenup, right? You get to pick the laws, you get to pick how things are working. It's really about your life and being captain of your life and taking control of that and making sure that it's correct for you and your business. Otherwise, what happens is if you have nothing, then you're stuck with the default rules or the mandatory rules. And those may not be advantageous to you or your business or your partner, whichever one you're thinking of. So this is the how-to of forming an LLC. Again, we went into more detail, giving you more information because at the end of the day, the more you know, the better. You know, I grew up with G.I. Joe and so, you know, half the battle is knowing all that stuff. So anyway, if you've gotten value out of this video, don't forget to hit subscribe and like and hit that bell icon to be notified of when we go live. And we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.